interrupt, I want to let you know, Judge Subramanian is back. He has begun officially delivering his sentence. He says to the court, he says to SeanCombs, at the outset, I want you to understand, Mr. Combs, you are not being sentenced for acquitted conduct. So he's not being sentenced for racketeering. He's not being sentenced for sex trafficking. But under 3553, which by the way is the federal statute regarding imposition of a sentence, under 3553, I must consider many things. Mr. Combs, you are a self-made artist who has inspired community of color. Okay, so we're stopping right there. We're waiting for these updates to come in real time. Serena, does that I'm going to tell you, there's like a but, right? Yes, you've done many things, but, and that might not be good for SeanCombs.
When a judge gives any sort of remarks like that, there's always a but. And when you start hearing good things, be prepared for the flip side because it's coming. And I will say to your earlier comments about turning life around, this is a very different type of crime than your typical one-day event. You know, yes, he was a great guy in certain other aspects of his life, perhaps, but he was living a lifestyle of these crimes. It's very different from a defendant who appears in front of a judge who had one bad day, right? Got robbed one person, got into a fight with one person and stabbed that person. This was a lifestyle.
Okay, another update. Judge says, we saw the video. The free game course in the MDC, the court hopes you continue to expand it. You are devoted to your family. The court, of course, considers the collateral consequences. The court has to consider all of your history here. And when that's true, by the way, the factors to be considered in imposing a sentence are and this is, I'm looking at the statute, the nature and circumstances of the offense, the history and characteristics of the defendant, the need for the sentence to be imposed, the kinds of sentences available, the kind of sentence and the sentencing range, any pertinent policy statement, the need to avoid unwarranted sentence disparities among defendants. So just looking for an update here. Okay. A history of good works can't wash away the record in this case. You abused these women. You used that abuse to get your way. Freak-offs and hotel nights. The evidence of the abuse is massive. I was sitting right here during the testimony. Joe, this isn't good for SeanCombs.
No, it's not good for SeanCombs because he started off with good stuff and he says, but on the other hand, you know what I mean? Because to my mind, I mean, it could be different, but a lot of times you start off with the part, not with the part that you're going to end with. You know what I mean? Here's the good news, but here's the bad news, and here we are because of the bad news, as opposed to here's the bad news, and here's the good news, and here's where we are because of the good news. I think the order of things may dictate that, you know, he's going to come at him, and it's not going to be a low-end type sentence.
Sierra, this is very consistent with what we talked about before, where that video was being played of SeanCombs, where you look at his history of helping others, you look at his works in the community. You and I had talked about it. The argument would be, yes, but at the same time he was committing crimes. Or after his apology video for Cassie, he was accused of committing crimes. It seems that the judge is being consistent with this, and I apologize if I have to cut you off if the judge says something, but your thoughts?
No, please do cut me off because I want the updates as much as you do, Jesse, and so do our viewers. But I think it's confusing here, right? But two things can be true. P. Diddy can have all the love in the world for his children, and he can be a great dad to them. But on the other side of the coin, he did commit these acts, and it is violence. And I think the thing that was most telling to me from what we've heard. All right, let's hear that update, Jesse.
Sierra, I'm going to throw it right back to you, but this is the judge. This was subjugation. That is the reality of what happened. These offenses irreparably harmed two women. You plied them with drugs. Why did it happen so long? You had the power and resources to keep it going. You were more than a John. Again, Sierra, it was the idea of this happened so many times. I said I think that was something the judge was going to consider here.
And what he said very specifically is that I was sitting right here. I heard the testimony. And I think that is what is so vital when we were talking about the way that the judge was going to end up with all of this sentencing, is the fact that it wasn't today he decided it. It wasn't in the 3 months that he had to go through and read all of those letters. No, it was when he was sitting there in the courtroom, seeing Cassie and Jane and Mia and all of the testimony there, that this happened over and over again. It wasn't, to your point, to what Serena said earlier, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern of abuse that the prosecution put on and displayed, and then here we have a conviction. And so I do think that all of this is kind of running through Judge Arun Submaranian's mind as he's coming forth, putting down this sentence, because, I mean, it's really hard to ignore.
All right, Judge, this just came in. A significant sentence is required to deter. You say you're sorry and you won't do it again. After Ms. Ventura's civil lawsuit was filed, after the video was public, an investigation started. You had a brutal hotel night with Jane, punched her in the head. Serena, that is the key here. That is something we have talked about during the course of the day. It didn't deter him. There were significant episodes that came out after the investigation, after the apology. He was arrested with materials in his hotel room that would indicate a freak-off. I think we're looking here at maybe 5 to 7. I don't know yet. What can happen any second, but I think we're looking at significant prison time here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judge makes an incredible note that, you know, you had the chance to deter. You were not deterred. You were given an opportunity over and over again, specifically during the investigation, and you can't be stopped. And if you can't be stopped, I'm going to have to be the one to stop you.
Yep. And by the way, the judge has considered his history. He said about the fact that, he became SeanCombs after his father died. That is especially impressive given the early violent death of your father and the trauma that must have left. So he's appreciating all this, but at the same time, he's hitting all the factors and he's talking about the evidence that came out during the course of this trial. He just said, Jane says he told her, take this pill, go out there, bleep his bleep, bleep him, I don't care. The court is not convinced this would not happen again. The court has considered the programs. They are outweighed by the trial record in this case. Now I'm wondering here, Joe, are we talking double digits?
I think we're going a little higher. We'll see how high we go. But 5 to 7 at least, and maybe even a little bit more. That's what it's sounding like. And there's an argument that the record supports that. Diddy was extra arrogant, and the length of time, I think, is incredibly persuasive and moving for the judge. Obviously, this is not something that happened once or twice and he got his hand caught in the cookie jar. This was built into what Diddy did. This was his culture, and he was truly lawless, just to put it where it really is. And so, the judge has been very honest about, I don't think that this deters you. And, I tell you, that tracks with me. Maybe we're all wrong, but to go off of what we've had happen and had said and had done and the trial record, that's not unreasonable for the judge to say that.
I am wondering also, Serena, if this is grounds for an appeal, where the court says, I'm not sentencing you on racketeering or sex. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. Okay, hold on one second. I'm getting the sentence right now. Okay, here we go. Oh boy.
I'm sweating.
Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. The court reaches a few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. Now, I don't know if that means that that's the actual sentence right now, but 135 months is over 11 years in prison. So over 11 years in prison would be more than necessary. That's what the judge is saying here, Serena. I don't know if that's the official sentence as of yet. We're waiting to get confirmation about that. But what does that say?
Well, just to throw that number out there like that means that at least he was considering the 11 years that the prosecution put forth, and maybe even more than that. It sounds like he's kind of tempering it, like that is more than necessary and it'll be less than the 11. But it also sounds like he at least considered it very seriously as an option.
Now I'm wondering, Sierra, are we talking 7 years? I mean, again, it's something we talked about earlier. Maybe the benefit of the family speaking and the benefit of the work that he's done was not to get to 11 years, but not to go lower than the 5 to 7 range. So that may have been the benefit, but I'm wondering if 7 years is what we might be looking at. Again, I'm waiting for official confirmation on the sentence here, Sierra.
I think that is possible here, that maybe he's saying, okay, yes, the prosecution, the government brought forward this number of 11 years. Yeah, that is more than necessary based on, oh, we actually have an update, Jesse. I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yep, a sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. So anybody that thought he would get 20 years, that's not happening. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. Even the probation department recommends a sentence less than half of that. But 14 months time served, that would not be sufficient. So he has rejected the defense's recommendation of 14 months. In other words, Diddy is not getting out of prison. He is not getting out of prison today. When he would, we're waiting. It's not like I have these updates and I'm purposely delaying. I'm getting to them in real time as we are getting them. Sierra, so again, we're now looking at between 14 months and 11 years, but I guess, again, going back to this idea of, are we looking at 7?
I mean, all speculation as of right now, but I think the most important thing is what you just said there, Jesse. P. Diddy, SeanCombs, is not getting out of jail today. And the 14-month recommendation that the defense brought has just been thrown completely out the window. The judge says, no, that's not sufficient enough. And I think what he's saying could be taken in a couple of different ways. One, that the 11 years is sufficient. Yes, I mean, based on your conviction here, because again, remember, this is a conviction. 11 years makes sense. It checks out. I agree with the prosecution. But to what Serena said earlier, perhaps, oh, and we do have a new update. Jesse,
I think we have the official sentence right now for Sean Diddy Combs. After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the judge has just said, here the data shows a wide variety of sentences. Weighing all of the relevant factors, the court determines that the sentence is 50 months of incarceration. So 50 months of incarceration is a little over 4 years. It's 4.16 years in prison. Now, that is a bit lower than what the range was of 5 to 7 years, Sierra. Let's start there. If I'm reading this correct, and we're talking 50 months, and we have another update coming in. I'm just waiting to see what it is. But right now, it appears that Sean Combs has officially been sentenced to 50 months of incarceration, so 4 years in prison. You talk about time served, right? About a year. Are we talking now then 3 years, right, Sierra?
Yeah, so about 3 more years based on the 1 year that he has already served. And I guess, I mean, it is a win for P. Diddy, and that the government asked for 11. You know, the recommendation was 5 to 7, which a lot of us guessed would happen. I mean, yes, he wanted to be out today. That was his goal. The defense, of course, wanting the 14 months. But 3 years compared to the 11 that the judge says, yeah, that's warranted. I mean, there's a huge difference in the range there. More than a decade versus less than half of a decade. We've got another update, Jesse, back to you.
Yep. Serena, Sean Combs was sentenced to 50 months of incarceration by Judge Subramanian, so a little over 4 years. That minus the 14 months already served. Is that the appropriate sentence, Serena?
Well, I'm sure Diddy is not thrilled to not walk out today, but he should be pretty happy with his defense team, because I think the judge giving less than half of the prosecutor's recommendation and also less than what the pre-sentence report had said is a win for him. I do believe that 4 years is a win in this particular case.
Joe, what did it? Was it his letter? Was it the letters of family? Was it the children speaking? Was it the work that he's doing behind bars? Was it the nature of these charges? You know, as much as we say that look, the judge was not convinced to throw out the charges, right? The defense put forward that motion saying transportation to engage in prostitution should be thrown out. This is not prostitution. He's protected by the First Amendment. The judge didn't buy it. But the argument, hey, he wasn't convicted of racketeering. He wasn't convicted of trafficking, just the prostitution charges, can't create a disparity based on other defendants who are sentenced. Maybe 4 years is appropriate and won't be overturned on appeal.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had to position this a certain way. And there's a couple things to figure in. First of all, we got to go back to the fact that the defense did an enormous job in getting him off of the most serious charges, right? So we're talking about something that's going to be smaller and it's going to be less time anyway. Next, there's the probation department recommendation, right? Which put things at a certain place. And it sounded like even though the judge talked about how 11 years wouldn't have necessarily been unreasonable, and he said 14 months would have been entirely unreasonable if I am hearing it correctly, he still is in line in that he doesn't want to do something that'll necessarily be appealable, and he wants to arrive somewhere not too far afield from the recommendations themselves. And so again, here's Diddy in a situation where he did a lot better than he might have. And you know, that 3 years is going to go by in no time. And the day that he was found guilty of most of everything, it ensured that he would have a date that he would get home at some point anyway. So he will get home. He's better off than he may have been, than a lot of people would have been, even though he's not coming home today.
Serena, does he serve the full 3 years or does he serve 85%? In other words, would he serve 2.5 years?
So there is opportunity for him to get out earlier on good behavior. And so the calculation is not exact. And time will tell whether he will be getting out with some time off from the full 3. I know it's a 4-year sentence. Obviously, the 14 months counts. You already deduct that. I mean, that's definitely coming off because he does have credit for the time served. So already it's less than the sentence that he's getting, the 4 years. But yeah, he could very easily be walking out sooner rather than later. So the children will have their father home sooner than they expected. And as Joe mentioned before, he can be on his comeback tour, you know, in no time.
We had a poll up. What do you think Diddy's sentence will be? So 31% said less than 5 years. They were correct. It's interesting as we're processing the sentence of 4 years, time served 3, maybe 85%, so 2.5, 3 years to serve behind bars. I wonder if he's actually going to now have to serve it at the MDC because it's it's a lesser sentence than we were anticipating. I will say the court imposes a fine of $500,000, including to defray the costs of imprisonment. There is no restitution, but there is forfeiture as reflected in the order. There is a $5,000 fine under the statute and a special assessment of $200. Sierra, I go to you. This is interesting because I also wonder what the reaction is going to be outside that courthouse in a few minutes. What we're going to hear from the attorneys, what we're going to hear from supporters of SeanCombs, what we might be hearing from potential victims or people who are there opposed to SeanCombs. Are you seeing anything outside since the sentence has been read?
You know what's interesting, Jesse? After the verdict came down, you could feel it in the air. It was, intense. You could actually feel the emotion. Now that the sentence has been handed down, it seems to me like no one around us actually knows that it was handed down. I mean, it did just happen. We're probably one of the first ones to report it at all, but there's been no commotion. There's been no cheering. There's been no free Diddy, in support of Diddy. There's been no opposition to Diddy. That has been pretty interesting to me overall. I mean, as far as what we're going to hear from the attorneys, I said this about the verdict, and I'm going to say it about this too. I think it's a win for P. Diddy. I mean, the fact that he was up against this RICO charge, the racketeering conspiracy, had he been convicted of that, he could have faced essentially the rest of his life behind bars. Now he had pretty much the lowest charge that he was convicted of, this transportation to engage in prostitution. And now, based on what Serena is saying with the 4 years, and maybe he could serve less based on, good behavior, etc. I'm going to say that's a huge win for Diddy, especially when his life was in the balance. And I wonder if that's what we're going to hear. I wonder if prosecutors are going to say, we asked for the 11 years. The judge says it was warranted, and yet we didn't get the 11 years. And I wonder if the defense is going to say, it's still too much. It's far too long. Get him out with his children. We're going to appeal. I mean, so there's still a lot of